the literature says that refugees are usually represented either as a security threat, a threat to our way of life, and it's called the securitization of asylum, or they're represented as victims, so a humanitarian angle about, this is tragic, we must help them. Within those representations, refugees are always homogenised as this one-dimensional representation of a refugee. And where that word refugeeness comes from is from Lisa Malki, who talks about the construction of refugeeness. So refugees are represented in this one-dimensional, stereotypical way of who is a refugee, and then feeding into who is considered a real refugee, worthy of our compassion or our help. So I was curious then to see how the New Zealand media were representing refugees. Yeah, going back, I guess, to post-development and the representation of development subjects, I put quotation marks there, it really sets up that binary between us and them. And so the way the Western world, I guess, or, international development agencies tend to be Western agencies, so-called developed countries, first world countries. These are some terms that are bandied around in international development thought. They're generally representing the other. So for an argument for why we should intervene, why we need to help, within that power dynamic, I guess you could call it, is where media as a machinery of representation comes into play, because that's a way, a lot of international development agencies, communicate about the work. Or if, media coverage of a civil war, people fleeing across borders, you see that all the time. And it's important work to document what's going on in the world, but it really does set up this binary dynamic between us and them in terms of us, are the consumers of that imagery, or reading about it in the newspaper, seeing it on the TV news at night, if people still do that, or on social media. We are consuming that and creating an idea of them being those people on the other side of the world, that distant suffering. We don't know them, we're not related. It's hard for us to comprehend what people might be going through, but it sets up this binary between us and them. Us as being, we need to do something, we need to help, we need to save them, and them being the poor, helpless victims that we need to save. And if I can just briefly touch on, the implications of that representation, because we shape our understanding of the other in these terms, when we actually come maybe face to face with the other, in terms of, say, refugee resettlement, we can't see beyond that helpless, suffering victim. So if somebody has got an iPhone or is dressed really well, or, they can't be a refugee, because refugees are only, destitute, helpless, poor, they can't possibly be a refugee if they have like an iPhone. And there was a lot of discussion going on in the media and the comments section during the Syrian, refugee crisis.
Thanks for watching PhD Unpacked. If you enjoyed that little snippet and you want to watch the whole interview and have access to a whole bunch of extra stuff surrounding the PhD Unpacked project, head over to Patreon and become a patron. Patreon.com/PhD Unpacked.